Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're going to talk about Thanksgiving. And we're going to start off by looking at the English colonists that were in Plymouth. And we're going to start by we're starting Proverbs here in verse 18 through 16, our explanation of who was actually there. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. Okay, gift here doesn't mean bribe, like sometimes gift means in King James. In this case, it means like his talent. Like we say someone's gifted. Everyone's gifted in some regard, but some of those gift makes room for them. People make room for them because of their gift and brings them before great men. But not everyone. We're gonna look at why. Proverbs 22:29. See a man as diligent in his business, he shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men, mean meaning average. Okay, so what because it's the one that's diligent to develop that gift it's going to be noticed. And developing is not just going to school to get, or trade school or whatever, to get a basic education, get a job and stop. No, developing is being diligent in developing is a lifetime learning, continuously getting better at it. Maybe even create a whole new branch of an art or a science or whatever. So he's going to stand before rulers when he does that because of his expertise. And of course, that would apply to a woman. Now, we're going to look at one more thing here in Proverbs 24:3-6. Through wisdom, a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant things. A wise man is strong, yea, a man of knowledge increases strength. For by wise counsel you shall make war. In the midst in the multitude of counselors there is safety. So the admonition of the Bible, the writings of Solomon, is for us to get wisdom and understanding and knowledge. And knowledge in all areas, including how to fight, how to make war. So you can be wise and win war. Not that you're pursuing war, but for self-defense. So here's the problem is the group known as the Pilgrims, by and large, did not do this. And there was really only about 200 people that were actual pilgrims, somewhere in that neighborhood. And about 5 of them were well educated. About 5 of them were highly skilled in something, and the others were unskilled laborers. So because they were unskilled laborers, they had no choice but to let what they called the strangers, other Englishmen who were not part of them, join them when they built their colony. For example, Miles Standish was not a pilgrim; he was one of the strangers. Yet, if he had not been there, the colony would not have survived very long at all. When they first got where they wanted to build a settlement, they picked a location that was totally undefensible. So, and while Miles Standish had nothing to do, we're going up on that hill, and first thing we're building is a little barricade around it. Then we'll start worrying about building houses and whatever. Well, they built the barricade and only built one house with only one room when they were attacked by the Narragansett, and a nearby tribe of Indians, not the ones that they invite later, but another tribe. And they survived because they have the fortifications and so on and so forth. But they would have died. So they had to have the help of these strangers. As we shall see, the strangers eventually change everything for them and are kind of their undoing. But they had no choice. So the moral of the story here is, if you're pursuing God and you want to surround yourself with only godly people to start something, you got to everyone has to develop their skills so you don't have to have non-believers join with you. Because in their case, the London Company and the merchant adventurers were not going to fund them and try to help and loan them money and help to set this colony if they thought it was doomed to failure. And it was doomed to failure with their limited skill set. Okay, now the next thing we need to know, so we know that the English settlers the English colonists at Plymouth were not all pilgrims. The pilgrims are the majority, but not by a lot. And you have the strangers, the non-pilgrims. But now it's time to look at who the pilgrims themselves actually were, because this is vital to understanding Thanksgiving. Because one of the suggestions been made was that Thanksgiving was a holiday called Michaelmas. Michael, as in the archangel Michael. There was a holiday, a harvest holiday, popular in England on September 29th, where they basically venerated this archangel. Well, this is the kind of thing that was causing a stir in England, because this holiday came from the Catholicism, and Henry VIII had broke off the Church of England, but they were still keeping a lot of these holidays and traditions and so on and so forth that they got indoctrinated, they inherited from the Catholic Church. Well, some people want to get rid of those things and have the Church of England stick only to the pure word of God. They want to purify. They were called Puritans, like happened over in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, where Salem, Massachusetts was, and where present-day Boston is. Well, eventually some of the Puritans realized it's a futile effort, so they decided they were going to make separate congregations that were under the authority of the church, the Anglican Church, and they called themselves separatists. Well, among the separatists, there was a man named Robert Brown, and Robert Brown began looking at some things in the Bible, because he started thinking, well, we don't want to celebrate Michaelmas for sure, and Christmas doesn't, the Christmas story one tells doesn't agree with the actual words of the Bible. The wise men show up when Jesus is 2 years old. He's not. He's in Bethlehem. So on and so forth. He's born in only the main. There's no wise men at the manger. They show up to the house 2 years later, and it's plain from the text, if you study it out, that he was born in the spring. Which, by the way, the Roman Catholic Church even knew that. They used to have the first day. They moved the first day of the first of the year from March, the Roman beginning of the calendar, of April, before they moved to January later, because April is when they knew the man of truth was born, Yeshua, Jesus. So they know this. But this man Brown starts saying, well, if we're not going to do that, is there something we should be doing? So we're going to look at some of the scriptures he looked at that are relative to Thanksgiving to see what they concluded. Leviticus 23, 29 through 42, 39 through 42. In the 15th day of the 7th month, when you've gathered the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. And you shall take you on the first day the boughs of the goodly trees, and branches of palm trees, and boughs of thick trees, and of willows in the brook, and you shall rejoice for the Lord your God 7 days. You shall keep a feast in the Lord 7 days, and shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths 7 days. All the Israelites shall be born in booths. Okay. Well, first thing you need to know about this word feast in the King James is it's translated from 3 different Hebrew words, and one of them is Moed. And this in Leviticus 23. These are the Moeds, the Moedim of Yahuwah, Yahweh, the Lord. Moses didn't come with them; they're from God. And Moed literally just means an appointment. These are the appointed times, because these are appointed as yearly. Yearly, you're to meet with him on these times. That's the word translated. That's the word translated feast here. Oh, sometimes on some of these moeds, 3 of them, the word chag appears, which we shall explain a little bit later what a chag is. The difference. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you now. A chag is a religious festival, basically, a religious celebration. And the feast of first fruits, the feast of Pentecost, and tabernacles are all got this word chag applied to them. So he notices that we're supposed to have this. The first thing is, you notice the fruit of the land. So this is a harvest feast. You're to keep it 7 days, and you're to build primitive shelters and live in them. Okay, well, so let's look at some other things he learned about this Feast of Tabernacles, this harvest feast. Oh yeah, one more thing. Notice the timing. The timing of this harvest feast is the 7th month, not on our Gregorian or on the Julian calendar they used at the time, which would be July. The 7th month on the biblical calendar, which is a lunar calendar, a lunar agricultural calendar, which I'll explain a little bit later about the agricultural aspect. So this is the 7th month. The 15th day of the 7th month is going to put you in. Is going to put you somewhere like a little bit from the end towards the last week or so of September till the first third week or so of October, which I shall explain a little bit later. Okay, what's the next thing he notices? We notice about this holiday. What's the next thing he notices? They shall Deuteronomy 14:23-26. Some more instructions about it. You shall eat before the Lord your God the place he shall choose to put his name there. The tithe of your corn and of your wine, your oil, and the firstlings of your flocks and of your herds, and you shall fear the Lord your God always. If it be too long for you, so that you shall not be able to carry it, or if the place be too far from you, which the Lord shall choose to say his name, then the Lord shall bless you. You shall turn into money, bind the money up in your hand, go to the place of the Lord you'll choose, and you shall bestow the money for whatsoever your soul lusts for oxen, for sheep, for wine, for strong drink, whatsoever your soul desires, you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. So the next thing he learns is this holiday. Now, they grew up in the Church of Anglican. They know from Scripture to be paying their tithes and then paying them, but he's probably like me when I first read this and really sunk in. God says this is so serious. You're supposed to feast during this Feast of Tabernacle. It's a literal feast, and you're supposed to take your tithe money and spend it, part of it, on getting whatever you and your family will need to feast. Okay, so he learns about this harvest festival. That's in September. It's towards the end of September, middle part of October, and he's supposed to feast at it. Now we're going to look at Deuteronomy 16:13-15, where he learns some more instructions about how to keep this feast. You shall observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days. After that, you have gathered in your corn and your wine, and you shall rejoice in your feast, you and your son, your daughter, and your manservant, your maidservant, the Levite, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow that are within your gate. 7 days you shall keep a solemn feast in the Lord your God in the place the Lord shall choose, because the Lord your God shall bless you in your increase in all the works of your hands. Therefore you shall surely rejoice. So the next thing he learns about this he learned about this feast is, now corn there is Old English for grain. The Pilgrims had what we call corn maize, but of course, when they translate, they actually meant wheat, barley, whatever. So you're done with your grain crops and your wine. Well, this is about grapes. Remember, it's a lunar agricultural. It has to. This Feast Tabernacles comes after the grape harvest is finished. Well, in Israel, and indeed most of the old world, the native grapes would come due, would start being ripe depending on the year and weather conditions as early as the last part of May, and they would finish harvesting grapes 2 or 3 days before the fall equinox at the latest. So it kind of give you a setting for when the 7th month is going to be then. So the middle day, the 15th day of the 7th month, has to be after, within no later than a couple days before the fall equinox. So he has this harvest festival. He learns about this harvest festival, and it's not far off from when they're used to this Michaelmas business that he doesn't no longer observe. Okay, well, let's look at Leviticus 20. Now he looks at one more of these moeds, these appointments that he looked at. That's relevant to Thanksgiving. On the 10th day of the 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation to you. You shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. You shall do no work therein, for it's the day of atonement, to make an atonement before you, before the Lord your God. Okay, so Robert Brown learns about this fast that occurs 5 days before this Feast of Tabernacles. So 5 days before the Harvest Festival, there's this fast. But now, of course, the question is, does it apply to followers of Yeshua, followers of Jesus? Well, he flips over the Brit Hadashah, people call the New Testament, and let's just take a look, see what he finds. Now, the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles is at hand. His brothers, therefore, again, this is Gospel of John, chapter 7, verse 2 through 6. His brothers said, therefore, to him, depart hence and go into Judea, that your disciples may also do the works you do. For there is no man that does not anything in secret, and he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world, for neither of his brothers believe in him. Then Jesus said, and then my time is not yet come, but your time is always ready. Now, some people have stopped here and said, see, Jesus, that's the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles, and Jesus didn't go to it, Yeshua. Read a little further, and you find out, yes, he did. He just didn't. He just saying he's not going with his brothers according to the flesh. He's waiting to go. So Robert Brown realizes, hey, he went. Well, of course, some people said, well, he was a Jew under the law. That didn't apply to Gentiles. That was before that was all done away with on the cross. Well, Robert Brown looks at the life of the Apostle Paul. Reads what it says. Now, Paul's the apostle to the Gentiles. And here's one of the things he finds about the Apostle Paul. Acts 27, verse 9. Now, when much time was spent, and much time was now dangerous because the fast was already passed, Paul admonished them. We realize that Paul is still observing the fast. He's been out preaching. It's been like 20 plus years since the road to Damascus experience. Around 25 years or so, and he's still out there preaching, and he's still out there observing the fast from Leviticus there. Not only that, you'll look around, you see he taught these things to every congregation. He mentions he always uses references. He makes reference to Passover, references to the tabernacle, so on and so forth. And he even spends the Feast of Unleavened Bread with the church of Philippi. Remember, Philippi did not have enough Jews to make a synagogue. They met by the riverside. This is almost an entirely Gentile church, yet they're observing the feast. So Paul's teaching Gentiles to do this. So Robert Browning says, it's not enough that we just left these pagan-influenced holidays from the Church of Rome. We need to be observing these holidays that Jesus and Paul, Shaul, if you prefer in Hebrew, Saul in Greek, are observing. So he teaches other people. So some of the separatists join him in this. Those separatists become what's called Brownists. They're called Brownists after his last name. Well, the Brownists start observing these holidays, and besides like was becoming a big problem in England, not observing the other holidays, they're observing these holidays, and they start getting persecuted for it. Well, some of the Brownists decide separating from the Church of England is not enough. We have to separate from England. These Brownings moved to Leiden, Holland, and they are known as the Pilgrims, because they're going to a land that they're not. Well, in Leiden, Holland, the reason why they pick Holland is Holland's near some countries that are Lutheran, some are Catholic. You got England over here not far from it, who's Anglican, and people are literally having wars over this stuff in Europe, both internal and inside countries, sometimes even between countries. So Holland declares, we're going to have freedom of religion. Everyone's going to come here and worship God however they see fit. So the Pilgrims are going there to escape a persecution. And while they're there, they start writing books. This Brownist doctrine, the Brownists, they start writing books and they have them smuggled into England, and other people are starting to observe these same holidays they are. And this is causing all kinds of unrest in England. Well, it turns out that after a while they realize Holland's become a hotbed for atheists and people like that as well, because it's freedom of religion. And in fact, secular humanism is kind of taking over in the education system. And they get concerned about their children. So they decide separating from England's not enough. The Pilgrims decide we've got to separate ourselves from Europe. So they have a representative go to King James with a petition saying, "Hey, we want to start an English colony over there." King James is not to take anything to convince King James. This is a no lose scenario for him. If they go to North America, they're going to certainly quit publishing and smuggling books into England that's stirring people up and creating, possibly leading England to a religious civil war. They're certainly going to stop that, because England's going to be able to control the flow of things through the English ships. Are going to go back and forth, so they're not going to let those books through. If the Pilgrims die, he didn't have to worry about them anymore. If they live and survive, England now has a second colony. England only had one colony, Jamestown, and then another kind of a little attachment to it, a little expansion, like kind of like someone building a new subdivision to a town, right next to it. In the race to colonize the new world by European powers, France and Spain are kicking England's butt, and even Holland is in front of it. Now, see, King James couldn't remove he thought about having the Pilgrims arrested and taken out, but Holland said, "Nothing doing. We got our own laws. You're not impeding with our sovereignty." And Holland was England's only ally in Europe. They were concerned particularly about Spain, the Spanish Armada, all that business. So now that problem's solved for him. But the Pilgrims, again, they're going to take two ships, 200. They're all going to go over there. Well, it turns out they can't all go because they don't have the skills necessary to survive necessarily. So half of them are going to go or so. Well, turns out one of the ships isn't seaworthy. The Speedwell, ironically named. So they have to pack into the Mayflower, and them and a bunch of strangers who they slightly outnumber, and they get over to the New World. Now, when they get over to the New World, they lose half their members by the time of the first harvest in 1621. They got there in 1620, carving the famous 1620 on Plymouth Rock. But the winter, they get there in winter. They had to spend the winter in the ship, and half of them are dead by harvest time. However, they're doing better than everyone else. England had made this the fifth attempt to England. 3 of them, 100% died. And Jamestown, 80% died the first year. So actually, 50% is doing great. Well, fortunately, and for the Pilgrims, a higher percentage of strangers die than Pilgrims. So Pilgrims are now got more of a marginal, and they're not over here celebrating. So they're going to have a harvest festival, but they're not going to celebrate Michaelmas, which is what we're getting away from. They're celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles, because that's what Brownists did. And they were Brownists who took it a step further. So they're over here celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. Well, the Feast of Tabernacles in 1621, because we know roughly what time they had this festival. They had this thing, was from 21 September to 28 September. So it ended one day before Michaelmas, 29th of September. Well, in 1621, they're using the Julian calendar. England's using the Julian calendar. A lot of Europe, particularly the Catholic control, is using the Gregorian calendar at this point. So make sure if you look at these, you look at the right calendar. Falls on a Friday, and the 28th falls on a Friday. Well, so come along about Tuesday. They invited some of the natives, particularly their soon to be allies, the Wampanoags, and they come to join them. And for 2 days, they go out fishing, and they go hunting, and they have little games and whatever. They're having fun, but the main thing is they're hunting. And on the first day, they catch a bunch of turkey. They kill a bunch of turkeys, and they also get waterfowl, and they also get some fish. Then on the next day, this would be Wednesday. The Wampanoag bring them 5 deer. And then they teach them how to smoke turkey and smoke meat so it'll last through the winter. Because all they had before was salt they had to get from the ocean to preserve meat. So now they have more food they can eat. So on Thursday, the third day the natives are with them, they don't hunt. They have a giant feast featuring this meat they've got. And of course, the most prominent one's turkey. So now the next day, the 28th, is Friday. You tear everything down in tabernacles on the last day, and you have all the congregation, and you all congregate together. Natives aren't interested in that. They've went home. So that's the first holiday that people call Thanksgiving. But again, the historians have looked at another year besides 1621 where they think some of these traditions came from. Now, what happened the other year was 2 years later, 1623. In 1623, 2 more ships come bringing more colonists, English colonists. Some are pilgrims, a lot of strangers. So the pilgrims are now getting a little bit back more even with the number of pilgrim to stranger ratios, getting about 50-50 here again. Well, that was in July. A couple of months later, which would be September, a third ship shows up, but is not carrying fresh colonists, but rather has been in the New World and wants to return to England and stops to get some supplies because it's near harvest time, so it's helping to be able to buy some supplies, trade for metal objects or whatever, so they can go back to England. Well, the problem is, ever since the July ship showed up with all these strangers, there's been a drought. Well, they get there, they find there's a drought, but they find the pilgrims have a day of fasting. They have a fast, and they're praying for rain. The next day, it begins to rain, and they get alternating days of rain and warm weather, and the crops just explode. A few days after that, they had a feast for over a week. Again, Feast Tabernacles, 8 days. And a couple days after this is over, they go home. Well, the Feast of Tabernacles, again, this year in 1630, ran from the fast was 23rd of September, the fast, which we just talked about, and the Feast of Tabernacles is 30 September through 7th August. So it starts one day after Michaelmas. So they really did have a holiday, but what they never had was a one-day holiday called Thanksgiving. They had a one-day fast, which I assume will think, well, that was Thanksgiving. It's only one day. But it was a fast. There's no feast. They had these other holidays that featured feasting, but they were longer than one day. So now I'm going to discuss how we got from that to a one day feast called Thanksgiving in November. Well, the strangers liked the whole one day. They kept doing this thing on Thursday. That became a tradition. They're going Thursday, they're going to have this big special feast, and they liked that part. Eventually, they outnumber the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims become a minority. The Pilgrims are the minority who are still observing tabernacles, tabernacles to some degree. But they declare they get in charge of the colony, and they declare a civic holiday on a Thursday. One day feasting holiday for giving thanks to God. These people aren't like total atheists or anything by and large, but they're not pilgrims. Well, the thing is, the grapes in the New World are Concord grapes, wild Concord grapes. And the Pilgrims got there, and there was wild Concord grapes growing everywhere. That's why Leif Erikson came there 600 years earlier, called it Vineland, because there's so many, or Wineland. There's so much. But the problem is Concord grapes start becoming ripe towards the end of August and don't finish till almost the end of November. In fact, there's been cases where frost has set in, killed the vine, and people were still able to harvest the cluster grapes. So they're not reliable for determining the Feast of Tabernacles. In fact, the cultivars that derive that came from wild Concord grapes, the day they're raised in Israel in the Galilee, still don't become ripe until November. Not the kind of grapes, not the kind of grapes that were in biblical times in the land of Israel. Okay, so they're not reliable. But there is another crop that is a fairly reliable indicator where the Pilgrims live, and that's pumpkins. Pumpkins become ripe about the right time for the Feast of Tabernacles. Always a smidgen before, maybe the earliest, but right around then. So you can have pumpkin pie and whatever. So now the problem is, so they do this. Well, these strangers start moving to other colonies eventually. And they moved to other colonies, including, like a Massachusetts Bay colony, and then they go to Virginia. Some go to Virginia, so some head north, some head south, and they take this tradition with them, and eventually it becomes sort of a custom everywhere. The trouble is, pumpkins in the north are becoming, as they go more north, are becoming ripe sooner. Ones down south later. So you got Thanksgiving being declared by governors of these colonies. A governor makes a proclamation of a day of Thanksgiving between September and October. No one's, maybe early November in some cases, but generally September and October they can't agree. And as far as Plymouth Colony goes, this was eventually its undoing. It eventually got absorbed in the Massachusetts colony. That's why there's no Plymouth Colony in the 13 original colonies. And Plymouth Colony wasn't too small. It was about the size of the Rhode Island colony. It simply got absorbed because, again, the Pilgrims' undoing was their lack of skills that forced them to be so reliant upon the strangers. And eventually the strangers became the majority and took over. So, but this holiday lives on. Well, when the United States, when the Continental Congress wants some sort of uniformity, and they declare a national one. Well, it doesn't work too well. Some colonies observe the national one. Some colonies observe their local one. Some observe both. George Washington becomes president, starts making yearly proclamations of the day of Thanksgiving. Most of the time, sometimes in October, November, 1 year in February, for some reason. And all the presidents after him continue this except Thomas Jefferson. Well, you get to Abraham Lincoln, and Abraham Lincoln in 1663, Civil War is going on, and he recognizes that despite this terrible war, there's all kinds of growth and prosperity going on in America, despite this worst war in American history on American soil going on. So he declares a national day of Thanksgiving perpetually from now on, same date, last Thursday of November. And why the last Thursday of November? It's because Florida has two pumpkin seasons because of how warm it is. Pumpkins usually take about 100 days after you plant them before you can harvest them. They have one in March, and in August, towards the end, you can plant again and have a second pumpkin season. So to make sure that the pumpkin harvest was over in all the states, he goes to the last Thursday of November, and he proclaimed it. And every president after him continues to proclaim the same thing until 1939, when FDR decides to move it. There's 5 Thursdays that year. He decides to move it back one, so there'll be an extra week of Christmas shopping. And he wants to move it back to. He moves it to the third. He moves it back by an extra one the next 2 years, to making the third. Him and Congress finally come up with a compromise. It's going to be the 4th. It's always going to be the 4th Thursday of November, which it is today. So the question becomes to us, the question for some people is it okay to celebrate Thanksgiving? I mean, we can't make a moed, an appointment for God. Can we make an appointment, a national appointment? Can we make a chag, a religious holiday? Because some people argue Thanksgiving is a religious holiday. I mean, it is set aside for giving thanks to God for the goodness He's shown us in the last year. Well, let's look at some examples in the Bible where chag is used, or at least days are treated like a chag, and see. 1 Samuel 20, verse 5. David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. Let me go and hide myself in the field under the third day at even." Okay, if you look about the new moon, you'll find, here's what you find. In the Torah, there's only instruction about it is to blow the trumpet over the sacrifice on the new moon to indicate, the signal, the first day of the month. The month begins in the new moon. However, by David's time, they're having a feast every time there's a new moon. And you go on and read, you find out later it becomes treated like a Sabbath. And when Messiah rules, it will be treated like a Sabbath. So this is a chag. In the word, it's treated like a chag. This day's treated like a chag, that even though it's not a chag in the Torah, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Law of Moses. Well, let's look and see if is that just coincidence? No, we're going to look and see some more. 2 Samuel 6, 15 through 19. So David and all the house of Israel brought the ark of God with shouting with the sound of the trumpet. As the ark of God, the Lord came to the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw the king David leaping and dancing for the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set in his place in the midst of the tabernacle of David the pitchfork. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings for the Lord. As soon as David made an end of offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. He dealt among all the people, even among the whole multitude as well, to women as men, to everyone a piece of cake, a cake of bread, a good piece of flesh, a flagon of wine. So all the people departed, everyone to his house. So David's got this chag. In fact, if I remember correctly, in a parallel passage, it actually uses the word chag. He's got this thing like a chag. He's celebrating here over bringing the ark into the city of David and not into Jerusalem. And I want you to notice that David is the one. He's actually making sacrifices on there. He's got the ark in Jerusalem. So what's the deal? I mean, the tabernacle is over in Shiloh. Is this contrary to the word of God? Is this contrary to the Torah? No, because God said, once I put my name on it, you shall sacrifice there. Well, in Shiloh, they should have moved the tabernacle from Shiloh to Jerusalem once God revealed that was the place where he put his name on. But they didn't. So David set up a tabernacle, and since the priest is over there in Shiloh, the high priest, he is going to act as priest and do this. And we know from the text that Yahuwah approves all this. Let's look at another example. 1 Kings 8:63 through 66. And Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offerings, which had offered to the Lord 220,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of the Lord. And the same day the king did all the middle of courts before the Lord, the house of the Lord. For there he offered burnt offerings and meat offerings and the fat of the peace offerings, because the brazen altars before the Lord was too little to receive the burnt offerings and meat offerings and the fat of the peace offerings. At that time Solomon held a feast, and all Israel with him, from the ending of the Hamath unto the river of Egypt, before the Lord our God, 7 days and 7 days, even 14 days. On the 8th day he sent the people away, and he blessed them. He blessed the king, and they blessed the king, and went to their tents joyful and glad of heart for all the goodness the Lord had done for David his servant and for Israel his people. Okay, now notice here, held a feast. This word's chag. He literally held a chag. So And notice again, he's also making a sacrifice. Now, in this case, the priests are up there at the altar, the brazen altar. He's not at the brazen altar. He is set apart. He is set apart in the court, in the middle part of the court. That's before the house. So before he's sitting there in what will be the court of the Gentiles later. He has set up he sanctified an area of it, so it is much bigger altar. So the notice is Chag, and we know Yah approved this because he sent fire down to consume the sacrifice to show he was pleased with the whole thing. And he said that he created a Chag, what, to give thanks? David had done this to give thanks for the ark being made back into Israel. And I mean, in Jerusalem, Solomon's doing this because now the temple's been built in Jerusalem. He's dedicating the temple. So it's certainly okay for us to call a religious ceremony, a religious celebration other than the ones giving in the Torah. We just looked at 3 examples where this has occurred. Over in Leviticus, the ones listed in Leviticus 23. And again, not all the Moedim were in Chag, just 3 of them were. Now we're going to look at some examples where Chag is used where God is not pleased. It's not, you can't just have any kind of religious ceremony and be A-OK. Celebration, I should say. I mean celebration. Exodus 32, 2-6. Aaron said unto them, break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them to me. And all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and brought them to Aaron. And they received them in their hand, and fashioned the graving tool, after he made it in the molten calf, and they said, these be your gods, O Israel, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Aaron saw it, and he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation that tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. And they rose up early in the morning, tomorrow, and borrowed and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. The people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. Of course, we know from reading the story that means involve themselves in sexual play. Anyways, well, Yah's playing out they set up a golden calf. Okay. And notice they call it a Chag. This is the words Chags here, to the Lord. They're going to call this feast. They're going to have this feast in honor of this golden calf, and this big and this drunkenness and this sexual immorality. They're going to call it a feast of Yahweh, of Yahuwah. Well, if you don't read the story, Yahuwah does not. He puts a definite stamp of disapproval, and this kills 20,000 plus people, right? And kills a whole slew of them. Not approved, because it's a thanksgiving, if you will, to an idol. But they're calling it to him. Now let's look at first. We're looking at. You think they'd learn from this incident, but they don't. 1 Kings 12, 31-33. We're going to look at what their descendants did many generations later. And he made a house of high places and made priests of the lowest people, which were not the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast in Judah, and they offered upon the altar. So he did in Bethel, sacrificing the calves which he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priest of the high places which he made. And he offered upon the altar he made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, even the month which he had devised his own heart, and ordained a feast of the children of Israel. He offered upon the altar and burnt incense. Okay, now notice again here, he made a Chag like unto the one that, like the Chag that is in Judah, but he made it in a different month. So he's making a counterfeit of the Feast of Tabernacles. He's got to have all the same kind of ordinances, but it's not going to be a feast to Yahweh, even though they're going to call it that. It's a feast to Baal, to these calves he built. And he built, amongst his calves, he built one and set up in Dan, north, one in Bethel. Expressly, these people would not go. He sets up a like festival for them, so they will not go to the one the 7th month in Judah. He wants them. He wants to control the religion as well as the king, as well as the politics. And again, God puts his definite stamp of disapproval on all this. He sends a prophet to him who tells him God disapproves. The king's hand shrivels up. He says, "As proof of this, the altar's going to tear, and all the ash going to come out of it. The king had built, and it did. And then the king kind of repented, and so the prophets prayed again. He got his hand back, but said another man's going to come along, a king from Judah called Josiah, years from now, and he's going to kill your priest and burn their bones on this altar," which is exactly what happened. Yahuwah's definite stamp of disapproval on this cog to idols. Now, the word cog in Hebrew, in the Septuagint, the Greek word is eorte. And eorte is used of the feast of the cogs that are found in Leviticus 23. Every place but one, and we're going to look at the one place where it's used of a different kind of feast. If any of them believe not bid you to a feast, eorte, and you be supposed to go, whatsoever said before you eat, asking no question for conscience sake. Any man say this sacrifice of the idols, eat not for his sake that showed it, and for conscience sake, for the Lord is the Lord the fullness thereof. So if someone invites you to eorte, and you can go, and just eat, and they give you some sort of fruit or whatever, it's fine to eat it. But if you learn it was sacrificed to idols, not to. So the line here is idols. It's certainly always fine to have a religious celebration, honoring God, thanking God for what he's done for us. So no problem there. Well, I'm going to get into another discussion. Some people have not religious celebrations, but a regular celebration. Now that brings us to the third Hebrew word, mishta. A mishta is not like a cog. It's not a religious celebration. It's not even necessarily a moed. It's not necessarily an appointment. But we're gonna look and see how mishta is used. We're gonna start with Abraham in Genesis 21, verse 8. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day Isaac was weaned. So Abraham, and this great word feast is mishta. So this is just a general celebration. And Abraham, the father of faith, the father of circumcision, is also, for us, the father of celebrations. So the second time the word's actually used, first time is when Lot brought in the angels into his home. So if we're the children of Abraham, it's certainly fine for us to have a celebration for great events in our life. In this case, this is a rite of passage, Isaac being weaned, kind of like a graduation ceremony, like graduating high school or something would be. Okay, but what about national holidays? Can we declare those? Can we appoint a day, a yearly day for a celebration? Well, let's take a look. More Esther chapter 9, 20 through 22. And Mordecai wrote these things, sent letters to the Jews who were in the province of King Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish among them that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar, and the 15th month of the year of the same yearly. And the days wherein the Jews rest from their enemies, and the month which was turned to them from joy to sorrow, from mourning to a good day, that they should make them days of fasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor. So what we find here is, again, this is a mishta. The root word here for feasting is mishta. So they can have this mishta. It's a yearly mishta. Notice the same month, the same day. Adar is the 12th month. Is the 12th month. Some years have a leap month, the 13th month. It's the 12th month. So every year, it's a yearly mishta. We can certainly record having that, and it's for a nation, the Jewish people in this case. We can certainly have a national holiday, a national celebration, yearly celebration, even a non-religious one. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that would include things like the 4th of July. So we've looked at things like birthdays and the 4th of July. We're gonna look at one more case, and we're gonna look here now. The Greek word that Mishta is quoted is translated to as doce in the Septuagint. We're looking at a case where about a doce, which again is a non-religious celebration, celebrating some sort of event. Luke 15:23 through 26. This is the story of the prodigal son. Bring hither the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and be merry. For my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. The elder son was in the field, and he came and drew near the house, and he heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and said, ask what these things meant. Okay, so the father is throwing this party. Notice there's music and dancing, and the fat calf, there's no refrigeration back then. You kill that calf, you got a day or two to eat it, and that's it. So, very short amount of time. 3 days tops. So you don't do this very often. But why? Because and they're all making merry. Their music's playing, they're dancing, they're having a great time. Because he's celebrating a great event in his life, the return of his son to him. His son, he may have been worried for years. He was dead, but he's alive. And he was lost, but now he's found. So we certainly have precedents for general celebrations, mishtas. There's nothing wrong with celebrating birthdays, graduations, national holidays like the 4th of July, particularly and especially nothing wrong if we use them as periods to thank God, Yahuwah, for what he's done for us. So now we're going to look at a little bit more, as the Bible says, with respect to this this whole business about Thanksgiving, should we celebrate it or not, and as well as other holidays. Deuteronomy 12:28 through 32. Hear and observe the words which I command you, that may go well with you and with your children after you forever, that you may do that which is good and right in the sight of the Lord your God. And when the Lord your God shall cut the nation before you, whether you go to possess them, you shall succeed them and dwell in their land. Take heed to yourself that you be not snared by following them, after they be destroyed from before you, and that you not inquire after their gods, saying, these nations serve their gods. Even so I will do likewise. You shall not you shall not do so unto the Lord your God. For every abomination, the Lord, which he hates, have they done to their gods, even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in fire to their gods. What things soever I command you, observe and do it. You shall not add thereto, nor diminish from it. Okay, well, first, there's a couple things here. And the first one we'll talk about is not doing what the other nations did. This is the problem with Christmas trees, etc. Well, there's one thing there's one problem in some people's celebration of Thanksgiving that's definitely not kosher, so to speak. That's violating this, and that's the cornucopia. A cornucopia, you may have seen ones, this big usually wicker, kind of shaped like a horn, means horn of plenty. And and you've seen pictures of the Pilgrims. They got this cornucopia, and they got usually fruit at the end of it. You can see coming out. Well, I assure you, the Pilgrims, being Brownists, who went even further separated from Europe, did not have a cornucopia at their celebration. And the reason is because the cornucopia comes from Greek idol worship. It comes from the story of they had a myth about Kronos, the father of Zeus, and wanted to kill Zeus after he was born, but he got hidden in a cave in Crete and this goat raised him, and he drank the milk of this goat, but it made him really strong. And one day he actually broke a horn off the goat. After that, the horn began to sustain him and feed him. It was a horn of plenty. It never ended giving him milk when he needed it, goat's milk when he needed it. That's where the cornucopia came from. Cornucopia on your table, no good. That's like we're thanking God. We should not have something like that on our table. Now, the other thing is this: to say that we do not have the right to make a commandment, to add a commandment to God's commandments. There is no commandment, and we've shown quite well that it is totally fine for us to observe other feasts and other holidays and even have religious cogs besides those in Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23 were the list of Leviticus 23 is kind of a bare requirements, applies to Jews everywhere and those who've become grafted into Israel. But it's not an exclusive list, this and no others. There's no such commandment. If we do that, we are adding to God's commandments. We're not to add to Yahuwah's commandments. So that's something else you know about Thanksgiving. It would be wrong for us to tell people not to celebrate it or even each other. It is certainly not contrary to his law in any shape, form, or fashion. Next thing I want you to notice with regard to Thanksgiving is I want you to notice this business right here. Luke, well, let's read it now. We'll go into it. Luke 14:12 through 14. And he said unto him that bade him, when you make a dinner supper, call not your friends or your brother, your kinsmen, or your rich neighbors, as they bid you also, and the recompense shall be made to you. Now, when you make a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you shall be blessed, but they cannot recompense you, for you shall be recompensed at the resurrection of the just. Okay, so remember back there where he'd read in Deuteronomy, you're to have a feast and include everyone. Well, in America, most people can't really have 200 people over their house or whatever. They're not meeting outside like the Pilgrims did. But we have a tradition here, many people do, of giving Thanksgiving baskets or donating baskets. There's all kinds of drives to make sure everyone has a good Thanksgiving feast. They're able to come to our feast, but we bring a feast to them. So that is certainly in line with the Bible. And there's one more thing we need to look here about Thanksgiving and celebrations in general. Back to the prodigal son here in Luke 15, chapters 28, verses 1 through 32. And he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and entreated him. And he answered and said to his father, Lo, these many years I do serve, and you transgress any time your commandment. Yet you never gave me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. As soon as your son has come, which is about your living with harlots, you have killed him the fatted calf. He said, Son, you are never with me. All I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad. For your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. Okay, first thing I want you to notice about this is this guy's just a party pooper. If you remember the story, they divided the inheritance at the beginning. He's the older son. He got 2 parts. The other guy's 1. He owns everything. He could have had a party anytime he wanted to. He just didn't want to spend money. He doesn't want to spend money doing it. But remember the instructions. You didn't even take out your tithes to make sure you do this. So now the other thing I want you to notice is it's right that we make merry and be glad. Look, it is right. We are not to be party poopers. It is wrong for us not to thank God for all the good things he's given us. And if we're believers, we are like the prodigal son. We have so much to be thankful for. We got this. We were dead in trespasses and sin, but now we're alive again through Messiah. We were lost, but now we've been found. So, and that's true, but there's still a group who feel that so at least some feel that Thanksgiving's not for everyone. In fact, Native Americans, some call it unthanksgiving, others call it thanks-taking, and other things. And there's a little protest groups against Thanksgiving. Do Native Americans have any reason to celebrate Thanksgiving? Well, let's look at this and see. First, we're going to start with who Native Americans are to get some understanding. The Bible does tell us this. Just kind of there in plain Hebrew. And Joktan began Almadad, and Shelopheth, and Hazamaveth, and Yera, and Hodaram, and Uzal, and Diklah, and Obal, and Abimael, and Sheba, and Ophir, and Havilah, and Jovad. These are the sons of Yoktan. And they dwelt, and their dwellings from Mesha as you go into Safar, a mount of the east. Okay. Ophir is traded with Solomon and one of the things they got was peacocks. National bird of India, only native to India, and there's a different variety that was undomesticated in Guinea, Africa, that was of course unknown to Solomon at the time. So this Ophir is India. Now, Yovid, the Chinese have continuous written history to 859 BC. Write it down continuously since then. The Greeks, the Egyptians, and the Jews got 1,000 years on them, but still, 859 BC is pretty good. And in their written history, they have written down their oral history that from before that. And they wrote, before they ever got a Bible, that they came from Yavid. In fact, they also, in their history, they also have Noah, but they only have 7, not 10. They lost them, but the 7 they have are actually the ones in Genesis. So the Yoktan's descendants are people like this, people of the East. Now Mesha. The Greek word for that is kopon, and it is kopon, which and Alexander the Great wrote that was like the edge of the. That's where the Eastern people started living. Safar, in the day is called, the English word is Kabul, as in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, the Kabul River, and maybe even Kabul may have been named Mesha at first. We're not really sure when it was built or when it was named, but it was named. But Mesha, so we're talking about way over in Afghanistan. That's very far east from Jerusalem, or even from Babylon, where the dispersion happens. Now notice Mount Safar means counting. So you got beyond counting to the east. Well, more than half the people on the earth live in 1/8 of the territory, and they all are descendants of Yoktan. I mean, just those two sons have over 2 billion people out of 7. So beyond counting, notice you're going to the east. Well, most Native Americans, tribes, many of them in the oral history has proven to be very accurate about how their ancestors crossed the Bering Strait today. Bering Strait, came into Alaska, and from there immigrated. The Meso-Meridian sake talk about how they went down the coast of the Pacific, then later moved eastward, kept going eastward, inland, covering like Mexico and South America. Northern ones, how they went down and went eastward earlier to cover what's North America. And many of the tribes have an oral history like that. So Yoktan. Now the names of these sons, his oldest son is named Almadad, and Almadad literally means beyond what's known. This would certainly describe the New World. It was beyond what was known to the Hebrews, to the Greeks, to the Egyptians, to the Romans. Well, pretty much to everyone, and it kind of went 2 ways until the Vikings showed up, or maybe a little earlier than that. But even then, they didn't really realize the extent of it. Even Columbus didn't realize the extent at first. He kept insisting he was off the coast of China. That's why the Indies were called the Indies. He insisted he was near Indonesia. This is the answer to the Native Americans, the ones who went eastward to beyond what was known. And DNA indeed shows that they related. Now so far, this mountain is one of the mountains near the Himalayas, and we know that because it's near Kabul. And there's actually a tradition among people of Indians that they dispersed from there. They came down from there. They were even down along the Indus River, over the Indus River, went down and moved east into India. So north of that is the Altai Mountains, and there lived a people group called Tlingit. Tlingit live in birch bark teepees, and the Tlingit also have the Tlingit, another group called the Tlingit, almost sounds the same, have same words in the language, live in Alaska. Where's the thing? They say they came from the Tlingit, and the Native Americans, whether they're Amerindians or Mesomeridians, have a Q haplog group. It's unique except for these people in the Altai Mountains and some little splashes that string across there going east till you get over to Alaska. So it's certainly, DNA certainly bears out that this is that these are the descendants of Almadad. Really, there are characteristics of the descendants of Almadad here in a moment. The sons of Shem and Elam and Eshur and Aphoxet and Lud and Aram and Uz and Hul and Gether and Meshach. Now Aphoxet begat Selah, Selah begat Eber. Eber were born two sons. One was named Peleg because of his days there. His brother's name was Yoktain. Yoktain begat Almadad and Shilapheth and Hazmareth and Yera and Hadaram and Uzal and Dekla and Ebal and Abimael and Sheba and Ophir and Havilah and Yoba. These are the sons of Joktan. Eber is where the word Hebrew comes from, across from, to cross over. So Eber has these sons, Peleg, and out of one of them comes the Jewish people. Out of the other one comes these Yoktain's 13 children, 13 sons. Now in the Bible, the son that's oldest usually has the most characteristics with his father. That's why the Greeks, the sons of Elisha, the first son of Yavin, are often referred to by Yavin, who's really actually the father of the Italians and the Spaniards as well, but they came from the oldest son. This means the Almadadi are very close related to the Jews genetically. And that doesn't mean they are Jews, though. Now, there have been about 10 cases in North America, north of Mexico, artifacts found with Hebrew writing on them, usually block Hebrew, which is from 800 BC on, so it's much later than the Assyrian and Babylonian, than the Assyrian dispersion. They adopted Aramaic writing, but it just shows that there's Hebrew. The fact is, there's Hebrew artifacts everywhere in the world because Yah said he would disperse the Jews among all ethnic groups. And it just shows that he did that, including the descendants of Almadad. So now we know who they are. Do they have anything to be thankful for? Well, let's take a look. Ephesians 2:11 through 13. I mean, why should they be thankful at Thanksgiving? Let's see what it says. Wherefore remember that you being in past times Gentiles in the flesh, who were called uncircumcised by the flesh made by hands, at that time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, strangers in the covenant of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. Now in Christ you are somewhat far from made near by the blood of Jesus, by the blood of Messiah. They have the most to be thankful for. They were lost without hope until the Europeans started showing up. Yes, Europeans did some terrible things to them. But you know what? Native Americans did some terrible things to other Native Americans before the Europeans ever showed up. They taught the Europeans how to fight Native American style. Why? Because they were fighting each other. They knew how. But they were lost without hope. But now, those that become believers have much to be thankful for. They were lost, but now they're found. They were dead, but now they're alive. So it's certainly right for them to be thankful on Thanksgiving, to thank God that his son was made known to them. Okay, well, that's it for this week. Until next week, shalom.